Life as Ceremony shares personal stories, interviews with inspirational souls, and practical wisdom to help you reconnect with yourself and spirituality. Welcome back to another episode of Life as Ceremony. I'm your host, Sam Squire. Thank you for joining me. Today, I'm going to share two stories with you. One is actually about this podcast. It's not boring, and it's not about why I started this podcast. It's about how I'm so not ready to, but I'm doing it anyways, which I feel like many of us can relate to. And yeah, I feel like it's a message we need to hear right now. So I'm going to share that story. Interestingly enough, it kind of weaves in with another story that's about 9 or 10 years old, and it has to do with when 20-year-old Sam started a bootcamp business, and it was a pretty life-changing overnight success. And the story of how that unfolded is pretty wild, and I've never publicly shared it. So lots of people know it, but maybe you don't. And it's really interesting. And the message behind that story, and we're going to get into all the details. Okay, well, first of all, 20 years old, talk about, and I had no intention of starting a business. So talk about doing something before you're ready to actually do it. Yeah, like that's what it was, for sure. And but another message behind the bootcamp story, which we will get into, is about how sometimes Creator has bigger plans for us. And yeah, also, anytime I say the word creator, please feel free to replace that term with whatever resonates with you, whether the word is God or the universe, creator, the divine, source. Yeah, it can really be anything that resonates with you. So my invitation is to get in the habit of whenever you hear me use that word creator, it works interchangeably with whatever term resonates the most with you. Okay, let's get into it. Maybe let's start with the bootcamp story. Okay, so I'm 20 years old. I just went to Greece, got my yoga certification. I've been doing yoga since I was around 15, 16 years old. My first experience with it was when I was even younger, and I went to a class at the community, a series of classes at the community center with my mom. And I got really into hot yoga in my teens, 15, 16, and stuck with it. 19, I'm off to Greece. I did a yoga teacher training. I'm teaching yoga at a great studio in Winnipeg that I loved, that I still love, that will always have a very special place in my heart. It's also the building in which bootcamp was born out of, so it's pretty special to me. So anyways, I'm 20 years old. I'm teaching yoga. Eventually, I'm granted this opportunity to take over this class on Tuesday nights. And it was a really fun, active class. And because I was an athlete and I was doing a lot of kickboxing at the time, I was really excited to teach this more like physically challenging class. And for those who don't know me, I haven't taught yoga in 5 years, but when I was teaching yoga, I taught a lot of inversions, handstands, arm balances. I actually had a class called Ninja Flow at one point because we would joke around that we are, little ninjas doing all these wild transitions. Anyways, I had the chance to take over this really cool, physically challenging class that, just to help paint a picture for those who haven't experienced it or haven't heard me talk about it in the past, it was a yoga class with burpees and lunges and wild, loud music and pushing yourself in an extreme way physically, but in a good way. And it was a lot of fun. And, looking back, all that I know now, all that I feel now when it comes to ceremony or spirituality, and I'm sure, a lot of folks who were in that class with me would say, that was a spiritual experience in terms of the community, the sweat, the healing, all that happened in that space, all the love, the laughter, the energy, the medicine there was ceremony and a really spiritual experience, even though I didn't have the language to name it and describe it in that way. Whenever I reflect back on that time in my life, that is absolutely how it felt. Anyways, I'm teaching this class. It's the best time of my life. I love it. all 20-year-old Sam wants to do is teach more yoga. That's all she wants. I was a brand new teacher, and so I didn't have many classes on the schedule. And there was a 30-day hot yoga challenge coming up in the spring. And the studio I worked at the time didn't offer any 6 a.m. classes. And so I went to the owner of the studio and I was like, for the 30-day hot yoga challenge coming up, what if you were to add 6 a.m. classes Monday to Friday and I'll teach them? And, she was so kind to me, but she explained that they just couldn't afford it, which I understood as well. And I wasn't surprised to hear that. So 20-year-old Sam went back to her and said, okay, how about this? How about we add Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. or Tuesday, Thursday? And she came back to me again and was like, Sam, I would love to, but the studio, we really can't afford to. 20-year-old Sam was like, we can't afford not to, let's do this. I'll bring the people. If you add these classes to the schedule, more people will sign up for this 30-day challenge because there's 6 a.m. as an option. And she was so sweet to me, but they just couldn't afford to risk it. And yeah, I was, a brand new teacher, all the things. There's not a lot of money in the yoga industry or yoga studio industry. Anyone who's in that world probably knows that, so I don't need to explain it. So anyways, it made sense. So some of my friends were like, Sam, why don't we rent the space and you teach a class for us, but it's not yoga. What if you teach a fitness yoga class, kind of like that class I taught Tuesday nights. But because I worked for the studio and shared that class on Tuesday nights, I had to come up with something that was be different, right? And I did a lot of kickboxing at the time, and I loved the skipping warm-up we would do in kickboxing, and just being an athlete my whole life, and again, pulling body weight workouts and aspects from kickboxing, I put together this essentially body weight fitness class. I would say our only props were a yoga mat, a skipping rope, and I do think we were running shoes, but also I'm not sure. I think sometimes we didn't. And maybe another prop we had was a yoga block. So 3 of my friends were like, you train us. They were like, train us 3 days a week. Let's do that. And, we'll all pitch in to rent the studio Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 a.m. And, I physically did the class with them so I could, get my workout in, train them with this amalgamation of shit I put together that I felt really passionately about. And what incredible friends I have. And so 20-year-old Sam went back to the owner of the yoga studio and said, okay, how about this? I already have a key to the studio. I already work here. How about I pay you? How about I rent this space out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I offer a boot camp? It's not yoga. It is similar to the class I teach Tuesday nights, but it's different. There's a hardcore skipping routine at the beginning. It has a completely different name. It's different. And I knew in my heart it wouldn't take away from that Tuesday night class, which it never did. If anything, that Tuesday night class got busier because of boot camp. So anyways, the owner said yes, absolutely. And so I paid her rent for that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I knew at the very least my 3 friends were going to be there. And it was going to be the 4 of us working out in that room for 1 month. Little did I know, Creator had much bigger plans. And so in my conversation with the owner of the studio, I had asked, can I, put up a poster and a sign up for this boot camp? And she said, yeah, absolutely. And she was super supportive. And so that's exactly what I did. And I can envision it right now. The sign up sheet was a white piece of paper with lines on it on a clipboard where people put down their name and their email. And 24 people signed up, which is all the space that we had in that tiny little yoga room, 2 rows of 12. Fun fact, when I first launched boot camp, I didn't even save a spot for myself in that room. And I'll never forget when I walked in on the first day of boot camp, when we had when it was for 24 people and one person didn't show up on the first day at 6 a.m. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, thank gosh one person didn't show up, because there's actually not a spot or space for me in this room. I didn't even realize. And it ended up all working out, because when you're training 3 days a week at 6 a.m., sometimes not everyone makes it every day at 6 a.m. So it worked out that there was always a spot for me in that room. And it was a week or two into boot camp. And someone, like, we just finished, it was 7 a.m., and someone says, is there boot camp next month? And everyone kind of looks at each other. We're all like, is there boot camp next month? And I look around the room, and I asked everyone, like, do you want another month of boot camp? And everyone was like, yeah. I walked out of that room at 7 a.m. I grabbed a fresh white sheet of paper, put it on the clipboard, and said, if you want to join next month, sign up. And many people walking out of that room put their name down. And we threw up a fresh poster for the next month of boot camp and sold out 24 spots. And this eventually boot camp evolved. I'm jumping ahead of myself. But truthfully, like, from the first day boot camp started until the day I shut down the business and moved to the West Coast, the doors were full for years. And it was incredible. And I have so many stories about boot camp that I will have to share in the probably years to come, about just how that experience saved my life, changed my life, and I'm just so grateful for every single person who has been a part of it, you know? And what happened, or that overnight success, like, has absolutely nothing to do with me. You know, there were so many. I mean, I often think about, what if the yoga studio took me up on that idea, right? Or wanted me to be part of that 30-day challenge and I was allowed to teach yoga? Or what if my 3 incredible friends weren't like, Sam, train us, you know? And it's, I owe so much gratitude and thanks to them for making this all happen. And so that was kind of the origin story of boot camp, where it all began. Okay. Here's the best part. Not actually the best part. I had no fitness training. I had no liability insurance. I had no appropriate way to track my income from this business. I had no idea how to run a business. And I was doing it anyways. And this was almost 10 years ago. So trust me, after that first month of boot camp and I started to recognize what was unfolding, I immediately signed up for fitness training and got properly certified and got liability insurance. But for that first month, I didn't have any of that. So if 20-year-old Sam can start a successful fitness business with zero appropriate training or liability insurance, let alone the business side of financials, if she can do it, you can do it. And that is my point. Talk about starting before you're not ready. I had to learn as I went if that was something that I wanted to keep up and if I wanted to do it in integrity. And so I got my butt to fitness training. I got liability insurance, I got a business bank account and a business credit card, and I started figuring shit out. And so that is the origin story of boot camp. And I didn't intentionally start, but it really communicates that essence of just do it anyways. You learn through the process, you learn as you go. And people will support you, you know, and be forgiving. You know, I know in my heart what happened in that first month of boot camp. it like makes me emotional and want to cry just thinking about it and just thinking about I don't want to cry right now. And everyone who was there. And I guarantee you no one would look back and be upset about me not being properly trained or having insurance. And if they're listening to this, I hope and I think you're probably laughing. And yeah. What else do I want to say about that? Yeah. Okay. So maybe let's chat about, obviously, starting this podcast is intentional. And like I shared at the beginning, I am doing it before I'm ready, but I'm doing it anyways. And I kind of want to relate this to a writing metaphor. And the idea is that like we have to get through the first draft. And so often I see so many people who are so afraid to write that first draft, but they're so desperate for draft 17. And the only way you're going to get there is if you get through that first draft. You know, we so badly want to become clear and unblocked and at that finish line, producing that final product that we know we can produce, that we know we can achieve. And we have to write that first draft to get there. So this podcast, I'm like, do I tell them all the ways in which it's actually like needs some improvement? For example, so if you're listening to this, you cannot see the video. I also upload the videos I record video and audio at the same time, and I upload the exact same thing to YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see this great fireplace behind me, which is wonderful. So that I'm nailing, you know what I mean? In terms of like the podcast background, like I'm nailing that part into today's episode. Also has nothing to do with me. It's the privilege of living in a place that has a fireplace. So lucky me. My microphone is currently sitting on a tub of dog food and 2 books so that it can hopefully reach the appropriate distance from my mouth. I actually don't even know the appropriate distance for best audio quality. So that's my point. And you know what? Maybe in a year or a few years from now, I'm not using the dog food bin to support my microphone. Maybe I'm in a studio. Maybe there's lights. Maybe I have a team. Dream big, aim high, people, okay? But we have to start somewhere. And I don't really have the goal of having a podcast recording studio and a team. Like, as I said it out loud, it sounded kind of cool. I was like, oh my gosh, that would be nice, because I'm really terrified about the tech aspect of producing these things. That's the part I don't love as much, but we'll figure it out. Also, side note, little side tangent, when you are doing something that you like love or passionate about, sometimes you don't love every aspect of it, you know? And I think that anyone who is working for themselves, there's aspects that you don't love every single day, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you're on the wrong path or that you shouldn't do it. And that, yeah, we're not going to love every single thing and be good at every single thing, and that's okay. Anyways, so when I talk about that podcast recording studio with the team I have to produce this podcast, you know, I'm not going to be there right now, you know? It starts with recording it on the tub of dog food next to a fireplace. Yeah, what else? Like, my interview skills. I hope that those improve, but I'm not going to be a good interviewer unless I start practicing. And if we just beat ourselves up about not being good at something from the beginning and that prevents us from starting, we are missing out on so much. We are missing out on so much learning, so much growth, and becoming who we are meant to become. So this is your invitation to start anyway. Do it anyway. Do it if you're scared or fearful or have doubt, because it's the only way forward, and it's the only way you're going to get to that draft 17 that you know inside yourself you can produce. So do it anyways. Start anyways, and start before you're ready. Like, if you are waiting until everything is perfect, if you are waiting until you are not afraid, you're going to be waiting forever. And so somehow find the courage to just go for it. Give yourself permission to be shitty in the beginning. You know, I hope my interviews I hope they're okay, but I'm giving myself permission to learn. I'm giving myself permission to not be perfect. Recording this episode right now, I thought about creating some notes for myself. I'm also just trying to honor the way I work, and sometimes you just have to click go and record. And here we are. And that's okay. And allow that to be good enough, and allow yourself to learn through the process. What you're listening to right now, for me, is a first draft, you know? And for those of you who are writing your first draft, take that metaphor any which way you want, there's a lot of value in allowing people to see and hear your first draft too. Hopefully safe figures, go to friends, and people in your life who you trust and feel really comfortable with, so that they will tell you, like, keep going, what you're doing is amazing. Even if it's not true, but you know it's exactly what you need to hear to feel supported. And I'm just kidding. They probably do believe like what you're doing is awesome. And so yeah, it feels very vulnerable for me to share my first draft so publicly. But that's not new for me. Over the past decade, I've gotten in a pretty good habit rhythm of always sharing my first drafts and being okay with it. And it's allowed me to get to where I am, and it's allowed me to get better at what I do, because I am afraid to start, but I just do it anyways. I also want to go on a tiny little tangent about fear, because I feel like we have the time for it. Yeah, because I think fear is not a bad thing. And even though I'm saying, if you're afraid, do it anyways, I also want to say, if you feel fear, listen to it. That fear is trying to communicate something with you. When we look at fear as a feeling or an emotion, it is often one that is showing up because it's trying to keep us safe. And so sometimes the fear can be so strong that we aren't meant to do something, and maybe we just need to honor that. But also, and I'm going to relate this to a metaphor I like to work with about handstands, because I used to teach a lot of people how to go upside down. And it's really normal to be afraid to do a handstand. It's really normal to be afraid to kick up and support your entire body upside down while balancing on your hands. That's really normal to be afraid of that. And just because you're afraid of that doesn't mean that you're not meant to do it. What we need are some props. We need a wall to kick up against. We need a spotter. That's me. I can help you. And we need to find ways to support ourselves so that fear can still be present, but it doesn't hold us back from doing the thing we're meant to do, or we need to do, or we want to do. And so take that metaphor and apply it to your life. If you are afraid to do something and that fear is holding you back, ask yourself what you need to ease that fear and make the thing that you want to do, you need to do, you're meant to do, possible. I think the idea of moving from so afraid to not afraid at all is a huge gap. And so my invitation is to lessen that gap and to know that it is very possible to do what you're meant to do, want to do, need to do, while fear is still alive. It's about befriending that fear, honoring that fear, and finding a way to work with it. So ask yourself what kind of props you can add to your life. Who do you need support from? You know, when I talk about handstands and that physical spotter, you know, who, with whatever it is that you're doing in life, who can help you with it? Who can be your spotter? Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for listening to another solo episode on Life as Ceremony. Yeah.